Hi, good afternoon. Today I would like to talk about a real life incident that is related to a kind of exotic robbery that used to happen in England in the 17th century. A few moments back, I had done a live video on this, but certain small portions were cut due to some issues with the internet, and I decided I would make the video once again, and here it is. So let me take you back to 17th century England. It was a time when large isolated stretches of land were dangerous places for people traveling on it. The people were vulnerable to highway robbery because highways are such stretches of land which could be isolated, or to other kinds of robbery in other parts of an isolated part of a road. So there were many such highway robbers in England in the 17th century. But one highway robber stood out among others in the way he committed the robbery. He used to be a well dressed man while he committed the robbery. He used to speak politely, and he was also a well mannered person. And despite that, he used to carry out the end result that is needed to to get a robbery done. He had carried out many robberies, and therefore he had become the most wanted criminal of England. And this had also attracted the attention of the king, where the king had promised a bounty for anyone who would catch this exotic criminal. The bounty that was promised was 20 euros, and 20 euros was a large sum, as most of the men in England would earn as much as 20 euros at that time. So let me start with the kind of exotic robbery of the exotic robber that I'm going to talk about, who is called Claude Duell. And this is an incident that occurred during his lifetime. He lived between 1643 and 1670. On one occasion, there were three people who were traveling to London in a horse carriage. One of those carriages having wagons or coaches. They were moving from one spot towards London. They were moving through an open land consisting of rough grass and wild plants, and they were, and this stretch of land is what is called a heath. They were traveling through this heath on their carriage, and they would reach a point where many roads would meet, called a crossroad. And at this crossroad, there was a long wooden post which had projecting arms at its top horizontally. And hanging from these arms, there were two arms. Hanging from these arms were the dead bodies of highway robbers who were caught and executed and were put in display for the other robbers to observe and make them understand the repercussions and consequences of committing a robbery. In this case, as the wagon was passing through the crossroads, passing near the crossroad, it was the three people inside the carriage who had observed this arrangement of the wooden post. The wooden post itself is called a gibbet, and the criminals who were hung from the horizontal arms of the wooden post, were placed in an iron cage consisting of certain chains. And this iron cage was called a gibbet chain. And they were put in this iron cage to ensure that their relatives do not remove their corpse and bury them, and hence the dead bodies would stay on display. So the carriage was passing near this gibbet, and the people in the carriage, the three people, one is a gentleman, the other is his wife, and the third is the maid who served these two. And all three people were shivering as they would observe the gibbet, not only because of the terrible sight, but also because they're reminded that robbers, there could be robbers despite this terrible sight in front of them. The gentleman in the carriage, despite being terrified with the sight, would also reassure his wife, smile at his wife, and say, London is only 2 hours away. And so far, they had not encountered any robbers, and the carriage would reach London safely. Just when he was finishing with his sentence, the people in the carriage heard the drumming of hoofs of horses behind them on a road. When the maid had observed what was happening, she got to know that they were going to be under the attack of a band of robbers, five of them massed together. The wife of the gentleman also observed these galloping of the robbers towards their carriage and confirmed the fact seen by the maid. The robbers galloped on their horses, came along the carriage, and they pointed, and the few of the robbers pointed their small gun towards the a coachman or the horseman who was of the carriage. The horseman naturally was petrified. The wife of the gentleman was did not want to show that she was frightened, and hence she decided that she would take out a flute from the bag and play a jolly tune. Just when she had done this, the head of the group of robbers, or the brigand, would come to the door of the carriage, and he would also be playing his own flute. The three people in the carriage gazed at the robber. They were astonished with his appearance. They did not see what would they would see of a typical robber, a person splashed with mud on his dress. Rather, they saw a person who was well dressed, well mannered, and was on a good quality horse, what is called a thoroughbred horse, which are generally used for races. Those horses that have good agility, spirit, and speed. The head of the brigand, Claude Duel, would talk to the gentleman and praise the wife of the gentleman for her skills with the flute. He also assumed that she would dance well and requested the gentleman who was sitting in the corner of the carriage to allow his wife to step out and dance with the robber. As the robber was speaking these words, the maid in the carriage was astonished, firstly, by his look, and also recognized him that he was the most wanted criminal in England, and also an exotic robber. She whispered in the carriage, saying that he was Claudie, he was Duel. I told you that Claudie Duel requested the gentleman, that is, the wife of the gentleman, step out and dance with the robber. The gentleman was astonished and taken aback by the request, but nevertheless he granted the request of the robber. The wife had stepped out and had and the robber Claudie Duell and the wife, both of them, had danced a fast-paced dance. It was a kind of a dance which was popular at that time, called a coranto, with fast-paced steps. The robber, despite wearing heavy shoes as he was accustomed to as he rode on horses, was, despite having worn heavy shoes, was nimble on his feet, as good as a dance master. After a few moments, the dance was complete, and the robber would lead the wife back to her carriage. But Duell was not done here. He had some more business. He reminded the gentleman in the carriage that he had forgotten to pay for the entertainment that Duell had provided, to pay for the music and the dance. The gentleman, who was already terrified, quickly responded, saying that he had not forgotten anything, and he had picked out a pouch underneath the seat of the carriage and had given it to Duell. The pouch consisted of 100 euros. Remember, I told you that 20 euros was a good sum for a normal man in England at that time, as much as a man could earn in a year, and it was a decent amount. And here we are talking about 100 euros. Duell took the pouch from the gentleman, weighed it in his hands, and had told the gentleman that he was satisfied with the amount, as the gentleman was a generous person. If Duell did not think that he was a generous person, he would have charged 300 euros. Saying this, Duell and his followers left from the site, from the location, and disappeared into the dust. After they disappeared, the maid had heaved a sigh of relief. The wife was still occupied in thoughts of the adventure that she had with the robber moments ago. The gentleman in the carriage was wondering how Duell got to know the exact amount in the pouch that he had given to Duell. So this way, a robbery was carried out in 17th century, and this kind of exotic robbery by Claudie Duell was also imitated by a number of other robbers, and whenever a polite loot like that of Duell occurred, it would be blamed on Duell. Finally, in 1669, Duell was caught and jailed. Many aristocratic women had gone to meet him in jail, but they were not successful in ensuring that he would be released. Ultimately, he would be executed in 1670. So this was the story of an exotic robbery the kind of robbery that used to occur in 17th century, quite an exotic one. Hopefully, you found the incident from the life of Duell interesting. Thank you.